BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. And for the first time in a long time, I'm able to tell you guys, coming to you from West Virginia and mean it. Normally I say coming to you from West Virginia and around the globe, but about 5 days ago I arrived in the Mountain State, and it is great to be back. And today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? I hope everyone had a good weekend. Just a couple of quick announcements and reminders before we truly begin. And the first is that the final segment with Paul Brookbanks will air on Wednesday. There's a presentation that is done by Paul Brookbanks about his Zodiac Killer theory that has been coming out on Black Box Online Radio, and part 3, the final segment, will come out on Wednesday, and Paul looks at the prime suspect in the Zodiac Killer mystery, Arthur Lee Allen, as well as some people who are connected to him, Don Chaney, Sandy Panzarella, and Arthur Lee Allen's own brother, Ron. And now that I'm back in West Virginia, this coincides with the release of a Netflix docu-series called American Conspiracy: The Octopus Murders, which is about the suspicious death of Danny Casolaro from the 1990s, and it took place in a town that is rather close to where I grew up in West Virginia, and, I mean, it is purely a coincidence that it matched up with my arrival date in America. So next week, I'm going to be doing a 2-part episode on the Octopus Murders American Conspiracy, all about Danny Casolaro. Officially, his death was listed as a suicide, but some people believe that he was murdered, and that's what's being explored in the Netflix docu-series, and those episodes will come out on Tuesday and Thursday. So a lot of true crime content here on Black Box Online Radio, and if you want to follow along with all of these discussions, you can hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and you can also go through some of the links in the description box. One of them is for BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNed88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. Right now I would like to go to the first piece of Zodiac Killer information that actually came to us from Vincent McConnell. This was sent to me via Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. There is also a page for Black Box Online Radio on Facebook, which I've been using a lot more recently. Vincent McConnell has something for us about the recent book discussion that I did on Robert Graysmith's 1986 Zodiac. The Zodiac was a serial killer that operated in California in 1968 and 69. Whatever happened before or after that is still part of the mystery. And Vincent McConnell says, I bought and read Graysmith's Yellow book entirely because of your book discussion, the 2-part episode about it. I'm not sure if I've ever finished a book so quickly. And I must say it's literally the best thing that I've read on the case since I got immersed in it nearly 2 years ago. And I've been following the Zodiac Killer mystery for a while, but one of the reasons why I chose to do that book discussion was, firstly, it was a recommendation from one of you guys in the audience, but also, I hadn't read Graysmith's book in the past because it received a very bad reputation. I had read Zodiac Unmasked, and I've done a multi-part book discussion on that one. However, with Zodiac, it's a book that's been accused of being filled with lies, misinformation, disinfo, things that are not true. But when I read the book as well, I thought that it was very fast-moving, it's very entertaining, and it's not only what Graysmith thinks, he's also incorporating different ideas from different people. And back to Vincent's message, I would never have ordered it if you had not mentioned that the first half is a third-person account of the murders, which is one of the best parts of the book. In fact, there's a lot less graysmithing than I was worried there would be, though I did spot a few dubious statements by Graysmith. Now, I do have the 2-part book discussion, and the first one, part 1, goes through just the Zodiac murders in order, more or less, beginning with the Lake Herman Road murders on December 20th of 1968, the Blue Rock Springs shooting on July 4th of 1969, the Lake Berryessa stabbing on September 27th of 1969, and the murder of Paul Stein on October 11th. Back to the comment. There is a bit toward the end, as Graysmith is actively stalking Arthur Lee Allen, where his kid wins a prize with one of those signs that says, the Zodiac on it. It smacked me like a wall of bricks, where even Graysmith dealt with synchronicities that some of us see today. I personally believe these synchronicities are signs meant to clue us in when we are perhaps on the right path, or an audience for something supernatural. Are these real? Are they confirmation bias and rogue dopamine? And if they are real, how did the Zodiac do that? Well, I'm going to answer this one as directly as I can. I do not believe that all of the synchronicities are real, and I also think that there is a very wide range of possibilities where you could have something that's going to match up to the Zodiac killer. You could have something that is going to match up to a date in Zodiac activity, to the name Zodiac. I mean, look at all of the suspects that have been discussed on the internet. Say, for example, Microdeli's suspect is Shel Cavalli, who's the subject of the book In the Shadow of Mount Diablo. And one of his parents was born on one of the dates of the murders, another died on one of the dates of the murders, and it's actually matching up in some way that definitely gives you some cause for concern, and that's a coincidence that I wouldn't necessarily ignore. I would investigate it a little bit more. I wouldn't just say that, no, there's no chance. But at the same time, you have to think that there are lots of dates of Zodiac activity. December 20th, July 4th, September 27th, October 11th. Those are just the murders. Then you have the dates of the mailing of the letters, 7/31 and August 4th, and then the ones that go into November. And you might be able to find some dates that are going to match up. And I mean, Thomas Henry Horn talked about this when he said that there are Zodiac correspondences mailed on November 8th and November 9th, and his Zodiac suspect, Hal Snook, was injured in World War II during a battle that took place on November 8th and November 9th, and people can find ways to make it fit, and there actually are a lot more Zodiac dates than people would actually think about immediately. Now, as far as synchronicities go, it's not only about dates and numbers. For example, let's look at this issue that's being discussed here with the name Zodiac. Even the Zodiac killer suspect John Parr Cox, whom has been shared by Adam Ivester on his channel, Real Zodiac Killer Revealed, learned that John Parr Cox had a business partner with the last name Dudziak, Dudziak, and his nickname was Zodiac. And this is well after Adam has already accused John Parr Cox of being the Zodiac killer, and the nickname was spelled Zodiak, which is another one of the Zodiac killer's misspellings. The Zodiac killer definitely used that at some point. Now, was John Parr Cox the Zodiac killer? I invite you to check out Adam's channel, and you can be your own judge, and also say some things about him at the end. But I also just want to point out that it really is not so difficult to encounter these synchronicities, and a lot of suspects have them, and as Neil Arnold would say, they can't all be Zodiac. Now back to the next part of Vincent's message. The only things that really bothered me were that in Robert Graysmith's book he was changing people's names, which I get. I will likely go through my book and edit the text with a pen to reflect the names of these suspects. Well, of course Graysmith had to change the names of people because they were still alive at the time, and in the United States of America you can't libel a dead man, but you can definitely libel a living person. When Graysmith declares that Zodiac traced every character in all of his letters, I call that nonsense. The 408 three-part letter is obviously written with a natural flowing handwriting. And yes, that is talking about something that Graysmith mentioned. He believed that the Zodiac was using a projector and was tracing letters and so on. Maybe it was something such as the ciphers. But here's the bigger issue. Here's a bigger issue about tracing. I'm going to go out on a limb and state that I think some of the Zodiac letters are forgeries. And some people believe that the 1978 letter was a forgery and it was traced over another letter, maybe even a copy of it. And Richard Grinnell talks about this on ZodiacCiphers.com about how the line spacing just adds up, or the line spacing appears to be almost done in an identical way to other Zodiac communications. And I've also talked about this in my own observation about how certain words have identical penmanship. In my own unprofessional opinion, I think that certain letters are just forgeries, and that someone may have been using some type of tracing method to forge them. And back to the statement. All this being said, I really think that we need to be looking at Arthur Lee Allen heavily as a community, and we need to be looking at anyone associated with him, and we should be looking at these people in ways that others haven't thought to do. Now, Arthur Lee Allen is the prime suspect, and he, as I said, even Paul Brookbanks will be talking about him on the Wednesday show, but as far as looking at Arthur Lee Allen, countless people have brought this to my attention that he's just come up in the discussions a lot more frequently. And as somebody who does a segment like Zodiac Monday, I've noticed that certain suspects just become more popular. They are almost like trends. And I don't know why this is, but for a while I'll just get an enormous amount of questions and comments about Lawrence Kane. I'll get an enormous amount of questions and comments about Ross Sullivan, then Richard Gaikowski, and I guess now it's back to Arthur Lee Allen. And I don't necessarily have the best explanation as to why. It does not make sense to me that Lee Allen was going around telling almost all of his friends that he was the Zodiac Killer as some sort of cover for his molestation charges. Who would hide their sexual perversions by admitting to being a mass murderer? What does this achieve? One would simply then be seen as a molester and a murderer, hardly an improvement. And yes, by mass murderer, I believe you mean serial killer. And my honest take on that is, I don't think that those conversations happened. I mean, unless there's some way to substantiate them, I think that a lot of that stuff where you hear people saying that they had this conversation with Arthur Lee Allen and he said that he was going to kill people and use the name Zodiac, I don't believe that those conversations happened, and I believe that some people are just making it up. I believe that some people have an agenda against Arthur Lee Allen, and that they are saying that this stuff to try and vilify him, or at the very least they're trying to make him appear even more negative than he was. Arthur Lee Allen was a criminal, as Vincent just wrote out. He was a molester. He spent years in a Atascadero state hospital. He was an unsavory, unlikable individual, but was he the Zodiac Killer? The reason why I included Arthur Lee Allen in my debunking series is I just don't see the physical evidence, and Arthur Lee Allen has been put under the microscope by law enforcement, and I don't see the physical evidence. And if you want to hear more about that, you can tune into the episode with Paul Brookbanks on Wednesday, because he will try and provide a lot of explanations about how all of this could work. If I hadn't seen Allen's lowercase f and attempts to hide it when asked for his handwriting, his number 8 and lowercase d, I would not have the same confidence I'm currently saying in Arthur Lee Allen being involved. Well, Arthur Lee Allen also has a very similar lowercase h. Some of his letters do appear very similar to that of the Zodiac Killer, but others do not, and I believe that people are completely aware of this. And when you look at the graphics when they arrange Arthur Lee Allen's handwriting, it appears that it appears that they're putting them out in a certain way, really trying to focus on certain letters that look the same and certain letters that do not. And I think that that's all done by design. They know that Arthur Lee Allen's handwriting doesn't completely match. Now, of course, if you watch the 2007 Fincher film, they will talk about how Arthur Lee Allen was ambidextrous and he learned how to write with his right hand. When he was at school, he was left-handed, but he practiced writing enough with his right hand that he could write letters. And they openly say this in the Fincher film, no one is that ambidextrous. Interestingly, I was talking to my fiance, and she just shared something with me that she is right-handed, but she practiced writing with her left hand when she was a kid, like forging notes to get out of class. I did this too, just with my right hand, and I got caught, but she practiced enough with her left hand where she could write a note saying, you know, this is so-and-so's parent, and this is a reason why she needs to get out of class. So that can be done, and you wouldn't necessarily need an enormous amount of practice. But I still, well, that would just beg the question about why would so many letters look the same compared to Arthur Lee Allen's dominant hand. I mean, is he just moving the pencil back and forth? Now, I just think this ambidextrous thing gets blown out of proportion, and I don't even think that all of the Zodiac suspects who were ambidextrous were actually ambidextrous. And the final line is, but I am certain, thanks Ned, no wonder it's a book that is seen as the landmark in regards to the Zodiac mystery. And thank you, Vincent, for this message, and thank you for listening to the two-part book discussion about Robert Graysmith's Zodiac here on Black Box Online Radio. And I think it's something that's shared a lot on the Zodcast, which is hosted by Drew Beeson, when he says that Arthur Lee Allen was the prime suspect. He was put under the microscope, as I said, but he never went away. People never abandoned the idea. People never gave up on it. People never suddenly started to think that, hey, you know, this guy Lee Allen, well, I mean, he can't be the Zodiac anymore for this reason. He is still in the public conversation to this day. Maybe there's something there. Maybe there's some type of involvement from Lee Allen. And what a lot of people are exploring is, maybe Allen wasn't the Zodiac Killer, but he was involved in a different way. What do you think? You can put your ideas in the comment section down below. Share anything that you would like. And if there's something that you're curious about and that you want discussed here on Black Box Online Radio, you can send them to me, Facebook and Instagram, BlackBoxNed88 over there, also BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. And before we move on to the next segment here on Black Box Online Radio, I would like to remind you guys that this episode of Zodiac Monday is brought to you by Capital One. The Capital One Quicksilver card will give you $200 as a sign-on bonus. I kid thee not. I've done it myself. It's like getting free money. And if you're interested in this offer, you can click the link in the description box or the one that is pinned down below with the quick reference. There was a comment that came in on the presentation by Paul Brookbanks from Jerome, who runs the channel The French Wrecking Crew. It's also a page on Facebook. I invite you to follow him on both of those. And Jerome left a response to Paul Brookbanks' presentation, and he says, "I've been working on this case for 23 years, and in my humble opinion, the Zodiac killer was 3 people: Don Chaney, Sandy Panzarella, and Ron Allen. The idea was to create a monster as the Jack the Ripper. I believe he means similar to Jack the Ripper. Arthur Lee Allen was their patsy. It was really elaborate and well done." And I thank Jerome for the comment, and I also had the opportunity to follow up with him via Facebook. And he shared some observations about the case, or just some of the things that he thinks about. As you just heard from that statement there, he told you who his suspects were. But there was another comment that was made by Jerome that I found to be rather interesting. And it was relating to why were these crimes taking place? Why did these murders take place? And let's say hypothetically, if Jerome's theory is true, that it was this group of people, or in some way, somehow it was orchestrated and designed by 3 people, or 3 people are involved. We can just call it the Zodiac Killer, okay? Why would the Zodiac Killer go after the victims that he did go after? And the first one, the Lake Herman Road murders, December 20th of 1968, that could have been done as simply trying to commit a murder and get away with it. The victims were not pre-selected. It was all about just an opportunistic crime to almost test the waters, if you will, to see, can this person or people commit a murder and not get caught? And after that was successful, there's a second murder, the murder of Darlene Ferrin, the second night of Zodiac activity, I should say. I mean, both Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday passed away at the Lake Herman Road murders, but the second night of Zodiac activity, July 4th of 1969, Darlene Ferrin was a specific target, someone who could have been known to any of the people mentioned in this list that Jerome just provided: Arthur Lee Allen, Ron Allen, Sandy Panzarella, Don Chaney, because Darlene Ferrin lived in Vallejo. She worked in a restaurant that was close to Arthur Lee Allen's residence, and as Paul Brookbanks reminds us, also close to where Ron Allen lived. And she would have been a specific target because she was someone whom was familiar to the killer or killers. So you have committing murder to get away with it, murdering somebody they know, then going to Lake Berryessa, September 27th of 1969, and committing the Lake Berryessa stabbing to do a crime in a familiar location, a location that they would have understood very well. And Robert Graysmith even talks about this in the 1986 book Zodiac, when he says that the Zodiac most likely had some very intense familiarity with the back roads of Vallejo, and that's how he was able to get out of all of the locations there, Lake Herman Road, Blue Rock Springs, and Lake Berryessa, so easily, because he knew exactly where he was going, and he was extremely familiar with these roads. So, committing murder to get away with it, committing a specifically targeted murder, and then committing a murder in a familiar location. And this is where it takes an interesting turn. And Jerome can correct me if I misstate anything, but the next point was committing the murder of Paul Stein in downtown San Francisco, because that would have involved Dave Toschi and brought him back on the case, or brought him to the case, rather, not back on the case, but to the case. And Dave Toschi was a famous detective. The 1967 movie Bullet with Steve McQueen was mostly based on Dave Toschi. Then he would go on to be the inspiration for the Dirty Harry series, which would come later, but about involving a high-profile detective, as well as just simply bringing in people who are going to be taking a different look at the Zodiac Killer mystery. But what do you think about Jerome's observations? And I do definitely appreciate the thought process. And right now I would like to get to your supporter shoutouts on BuyMeACoffee.com, BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNet88. And the first one comes to us from Glenn Barnes. Glenn Barnes is someone who was challenging a lot of the information that was in the book Catching Zodiac by Dale Julin, and he also was someone who really just wanted to dispute the entire narrative because he knew Dale Julian's informant, Chris Avery, who provided him with a lot of the source material, as well as Dale Julian's suspect, Gary Francis Post. And Glenn Barnes says, "Thank you, Mr. Ned DeHaan, for your admirable, humble intelligence and common sense in seeking the truth." And Glenn Barnes, thank you as well. And the next one comes to us from Paul Brookbanks. And I should point out that both Paul Brookbanks and Glenn Barnes have had their material featured on Black Box Online Radio, but absolutely no payment is required. Never, of course not. These guys are simply just doing that as a thank you gesture. And next we have Batman66. Batman66, thank you so much for your regular and consistent support. And we also have River Prawn Pottery. You two guys are awesome. River Prawn Pottery also made a public request for other people to help support the show, and that is just absolutely greatly appreciated. And there are going to be some other ways to help Black Box Online Radio, which I'll talk about in a second. And our last one comes to us via the super thanks on YouTube from Mark Winter, and he left this on the most recent presentation episode from Paul. You guys are all amazing. And as previously stated in a recent episode, BuyMeACoffee.com is not only a donation website, it also has a podcast zone and a store. And now in the Black Box Online Radio store on BuyMeACoffee.com, BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNet88, you can purchase 2 new publications. One of them is True Crime Teaches Us to Conquer Toxic People. This is a guide that was once only available to the premium members, but it is now for sale. And for the month of March, you can order a hard copy. You can order a hard copy of this guide, and I will mail it to you directly. And the second publication that is for sale is the BBOR True Crime Shorts Anthology, and the same situation applies. For the month of March 2024, you can order a hard paper copy of the guide available in the BuyMeACoffee.com store. Just click the link in the description box or type in BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNet88. Shipping is only available in the United States. However, if you are international or you just prefer electronic copies, you can get one of those. And the electronic copies are going to stay in the BuyMeACoffee.com store. You can purchase those anytime throughout the year. There's just a limited sale on the paper publications of True Crime Teaches Us to Conquer Toxic People and the BBOR True Crime Shorts Anthology. And on this note of how and why people would choose to use a website like that, BuyMeACoffee.com, well, I recently appeared on the Zodiac Killer Channel's Interview with the Experts, and I was interviewed by Richard Grinnell, and he asked me about the upcoming events for Black Box Online Radio, and I said, ultimately, Black Box Online Radio is going to be part of a company that I was going to create called Switchforce Media. And what I said in the interview was, when I was 18 years old and coming out of high school, ultimately that was my plan, to open a company called Switchforce Media, all about media productions. And the most I ever did then was make a Yahoo account and design the business cards. But I just always had that in mind, and I'm 35 now, so for 17 years, that was something that I've just really been looking forward to do. And I even contacted, some people about maybe making some designs or logos for the show. One of them was Stefan Nyberg. I think he's a really good designer, and he's made some images for Black Box Online Radio, and he even created 2 prototypes for Switchforce Media. However, I do have to tell you, after only 3 days, I'm already out of business. I am not even joking. No, I made an alternative YouTube channel for Switchforce Media, and in 3 days, YouTube deleted it. YouTube took it down. They even shut down the email address, and they sent me this message saying, more or less, excuse me, but we think that you're a bot. We think that a human did not create this account. And I'm just like, why on earth did you send me a message if you think that I'm a bot? Who do you think would be reading that? And I was a little bit frustrated, but then I remembered I had a secondary channel called AstroPsych 400, and AstroPsych 400 had a different, kind of an empty YouTube channel that is also connected to the account where I hadn't uploaded anything, and I thought, okay, I'll just take that empty YouTube account and I'll just change the name to Switchforce Media and keep going, right? Well, that account has also been deleted. That channel has also been deleted. So, I mean, I just kind of sat down and I was thinking, I'm back to square one. And some of you might be thinking, well, what's the big deal, Ned? Just make a new account. And the only thing I have to say is, I'm just a little bit frustrated with YouTube. I'm frustrated with Google. I'm frustrated with all of the security measures that they put in place that are supposedly designed to help you, but they're actually just making your life a little bit worse. And it really just comes down to the point of, I'm just kind of exploring other possibilities. A lot of creators are turning to places like Rumble and Twitch, but I know nothing about these platforms. I've never watched or listened to a single thing on Rumble or Twitch, but BuyMeACoffee.com does have a podcast zone, as previously stated, and when I was encountering these troubles, I was just thinking, now, wait a second, maybe I should just go back to that. I've put out a couple episodes on the BuyMeACoffee.com podcast zone. Maybe it's going to be something that I'll be exploring in the future. And no, the company isn't really out of business. That's just me being a little bit dramatic, but everything associated with it has been shut down by YouTube and Google, so it's more or less just a temporary setback. But please stay tuned to Black Box Online Radio for some more updates on future projects connected to BBOR True Crime Talk Radio, as well as some stories that are going to be covering some different types of material. And on that note, I have to give a shout out to Batman66, who provided me with the suggestion for a series of YouTube shorts that I'm going to be releasing about the Max Headroom incident. And this is talking about a TV hijacking from 1987, where more or less somebody wearing a Max Headroom costume and at least two accomplices hijacked a TV station, and they just aired a very bizarre set of images and sequences where two people actually, were acting out on camera. And it's just simply referred to as the Max Headroom incident. And I was watching a documentary about this on the channel The Bizarre. It was a very well done user-generated documentary by the Raina brothers, and they asked some true crime challenge questions, and I want to show you guys how this stuff is related to the Zodiac killer. Number one, the question was one that I've explored a lot here on Zodiac Monday, and that is, how would you feel if the Zodiac killer mystery were solved? They just said in any true crime mystery, but I want to put the word Zodiac in there. How would you feel if the Zodiac killer mystery were solved? I'd feel really good. And then they asked a more interesting question. Would you be disappointed when you really learn who the killer was? And I think the answer to that is yes. This is something that I hadn't really thought about before, because normally people ask, oh, do they just want the mystery to be going on forever? Do they just want the mystery to always be taking shape, and people are just always going to be exploring it from different points of view? Do people just like the chase more than the catch? But here's a different question. Would you feel disappointed if you actually learned who the killer was, and it turns out that it's just some boring, ordinary guy? And my honest answer is yes. I think that I would feel disappointed when you just learned that it was someone who was, again, very ordinary, and he just got lucky, and he just got away with a lot of this. But on the notion of, is the chase more fun than the catch? No, absolutely not. I want to know the truth about the Zodiac killer mystery, and even when I was watching this Max Headroom documentary, I was just on the edge of my seat, and I was thinking, I want to know who did this. I thought that they were going somewhere with theories and possibilities, but the documentary didn't explore too much of that, and I'm just thinking, all of the unsolved mysteries that are discussed here on Black Box Online Radio, I want to know the truth. And Jack the Ripper, the Phantom Killer, the Black Dahlia Avenger, I want to know who actually committed these crimes. But yes, I do think there would be an element of not only disappointment, but also frustration. Look at the Golden State Killer case, for example, when you have a police officer named Joseph D'Angelo being arrested and tried for being the Golden State Killer, and he was a member of an anti-burglary task force that was using the anti-burglary measures that he learned about from law enforcement to commit the burglaries. That's frustrating. Just someone who is just betraying the people that he's supposed to protect. Roger Kibbe, the I-5 Strangler, very similar. His brother was a member of law enforcement, and he would always just ask his brother questions about how they catch criminals, and he would use that information to avoid getting caught. One more time, he was the I-5 Strangler. And I think that that is also just something that is very frustrating, and you're just always aware that people could be walking among us, and that they could be trying to mistreat and mislead the public. But I would love to know your answers to any of these questions. You can put them in the comment section down below. The first one is, would you be disappointed when you finally learn out the identity of the killer? And the second one is, would you be frustrated when you learn about how this person was betraying and deceiving everyone in society? And that will bring us to the next segment here on Black Box Online Radio, Zodiac Monday. And I have to give a shout out to Owen, who recommended the book The Sociopath Next Door by Dr. Martha Stout. And as you guys see, I'm always taking book recommendations. And this is a book that talks a lot about sociopathic serial killers, but it also explores sociopathy then in different forms, how some people can be sociopaths and not go on to be serial killers. But there's a lot of serial killer discussions in this. And I, again, want to look at how these things relate to the Zodiac killer, because there is something that a lot of people have been curious about, and that is, what differentiates a mean person from being a sociopath? What differentiates a sociopath who does not kill versus being a sociopath who does kill? What differentiates a sociopathic serial killer from just an ordinary schoolyard bully, or even an adult bully or an online troll, people who are definitely mean and enjoy inflicting either physical or emotional pain upon people, versus a sociopathic serial killer? And almost certainly I believe the Zodiac killer was a sociopath, either that or some type of twisted narcissist, but I believe that he was a sociopath. And the explanation that was provided in the book, The Sociopath Next Door, was that it is mostly about drive, it is mostly about ferocity, it can even be about social status, and it can also just be about a feeling of superiority. And I definitely think that all of those things apply to the Zodiac, but there's something that provides a better explanation for it in the book, The Sociopath Next Door, and that is, well, I have to begin with a quotation that I always share with you guys on this channel, and it comes to us from Susan Forward, who is a therapist that sometimes appears on television, and it's the thing you've heard me say before about how the average person has a conscience that's like Swiss cheese, and mostly it's solid, but then there are these giant gaping holes in their conscience. And what The Sociopath Next Door by Dr. Martha Stout shares is that why do people have holes in their conscience? Like, what would be the reason? And the answer is temptation. That's exactly what it says in the book. People will most likely not commit murder unless the temptation is extremely strong. Here's another challenge question for you guys. What would have been the temptation for somebody like the Zodiac killer? Or even if it's a group of people, what would have been the temptation? And I honestly think that the answer to that question is the Zodiac, or Zodiacs plural, believed that he or they would not get caught. And the Zodiac thought that he could commit this series of homicides and get away with it. And that goes back to the first point. Drive, status, feeling of superiority. He thought that he could arrange this set of homicides and get away with it, and that he had this ability to murder people, and he had this ability to commit very heinous crimes, and nobody would figure out that it was him. And there's a final challenge question that I will throw in at the very end of the episode, so please stay tuned. But as far as the Zodiac's temptation, I do think that it was the opportunity to create this persona where he could act like he was superior to everybody else, but in reality he was just some jerk that got lucky and didn't get arrested walking away from the Stein cab. And this leads to another point about how and why the Zodiac would function. Like, the Zodiac is committing these murders, right? But if he just wanted attention, he wouldn't have had to do that. I mean, if he wanted attention, he could paint himself yellow and run up and down the streets in his underwear. That's attention. He could have just written the letters and the ciphers. He could have just made threats and not actually killed anybody. The Zodiac actually went through with the actions of killing, and that is one of the reasons why I believe that he was a sociopath. And this is also discussed in The Sociopath Next Door when it says that a sociopath is somebody who more or less does not have a conscience. And the reason why they don't have a conscience is they aren't able to form emotional bonds with other people, or whatever type of bonds and experiences they have with other people are not about emotions. They're just about manipulations, interactions. And I mean, I saw a rather fascinating video that was on the Playing with Fire channel recently talking about this one. It says, and there's more or less a four-part set to human behavior: desire, thought, action, and reaction, and just that's what life is. And maybe somebody like the Zodiac would be looking at that in somewhat more of a logical and direct manner, with indifference to the well-being of the people whom he was targeting. Because one thing you see very clearly in all of the Zodiac letters is that he's enjoying it. And this is why I believe that the Zodiac was a sadist. He's very clearly saying that he enjoys this game, and he says that it's the most thrilling experience. To kill is the most thrilling experience. It's even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. And absolutely, I do think the Zodiac was a sadist, and I also think that he received some type of sexual arousal from committing these murders. But this goes on to another point that is discussed in the book, The Sociopath Next Door. And I'm not finished with this book. I might have to do a larger segment on the Anything Goes Friday episode where I just do a full book discussion on this, because I think it's really fascinating, The Sociopath Next Door by Dr. Martha Stout. And what she talks about is, these are some points that a sociopath might not experience. These are some parts of life that a sociopath might not even care about. Good, evil, okay, sure, not showing any regard for good and evil or right and wrong, not caring about that everybody thinks about that, right? But then you have something such as horror and humor. Those were also put on that list. And I was thinking, humor, yeah, I get it. I completely understand that. And by humor, I don't think it means the ability to laugh. I think it means about finding joy and sharing these type of emotional bonds with people. That already goes back to a previous point. And you might be noticing that a lot of murderers are reported to have been laughing when they commit the crimes. There's even a serial killer out there called Kenneth Harrison, who was the Giggler. I should say, there's a serial killer out there named Kenneth Harrison who was called the Giggler, and he gave that name to himself because, like the Zodiac, he called in his own crimes, and he said, "There's a body down by the water. This is the Giggler." Yeah, that's not a real audio clip, just saying. No, that's me paraphrasing. But yes, he was a Boston serial killer who murdered at least 4 people. And I've been contacted by some of his family members, and they more or less dispute any of the alternative theories. They think that he was guilty of everything of those 4 murders. And Kenneth Harrison was an impulsive serial killer who didn't plan his crimes too much, but he was also a laughing serial killer. And even the mass shooter, Elliot Rodger, made a video of himself after he stabbed his roommates. He went to a Starbucks, of all places, and bought coffee and filmed this video saying, "Ah ha ha, I'm going to get my day of retribution." Is that humor? No. I heard a fascinating breakdown of that video on the channel Bulldog Mindset, where it just said, when someone is just laughing like that, "Ah ha ha, I have this plan to murder people," that is not humor, that is not strength, that is not anything other than weakness. And with Kenneth Harrison, it's a rather similar aspect of it. Someone is not finding humor in anything that they are doing. They're just displaying their weak behavior in an arrogant way, and they're expecting not to get caught. Is the Zodiac the same way? Absolutely. Everything that the Zodiac killer is doing is just sharing his weak behavior in a way where he's expecting not to get caught. Just think about what I said about the 408 cipher. I like killing people because it's so much fun. It's even more fun than getting your rocks off with a girl and hunting wild game in the forest. I flipped that last part there, but you get the idea. He's just acting like an arrogant jerk because he was a weak individual. And there are people out there who absolutely dispute the narrative that the Zodiac was a sad little man, and you might already recognize that phraseology. And I'm thinking about Ray Grant on his YouTube channel, as well as being the author of the book Zodiac Killer Solved, and he absolutely disputed this narrative, just thinking that the Zodiac murders were all calculated and composed. But the more that I investigate the case, the more I begin to think of everything that I've just said about murderers like Elliot Rodger, like Kenneth Harrison, that it's all just weakness, and there's these similarities among them and the Zodiac killer. And I just think that there is an enormous amount of evidence that shows that the Zodiac was indeed some type of sad little man who concocted this very dumb and bizarre way of creating a murder plot. And I do say that it's dumb because this person is saying that he's going to kill people and die and be reborn in paradise, and those whom he has killed will be his slaves. Yeah, he's just being an arrogant, dumb jerk. And I don't have anything nice to say about the Zodiac killer. But that brings us to the next point on the list when we look at horror And this is almost something that I would dispute with Dr. Martha Stout. And I know that she's a PhD and I'm not, but I was like, what exactly do you mean that a sociopathic serial killer would not experience horror? Because there are so many serial killers and murderers who are just terrified of things. And this goes back to a video that I watched in 2018 from Dr. Romani, when she said that a sociopath is blank on the inside. And I took that a little bit too literally. And in some of the older black box recordings, I was talking about how, oh, sociopaths are blank on the inside. They don't experience emotions. And somebody corrected me, and rightfully so, by saying that, now wait a second. Yes, sociopaths and psychopaths do experience emotions. They just don't have these types of emotional bonds with other people. And I think that that's a very accurate thing, because when I've watched a lot of dramatizations about serial killers, as well as even documentaries, you'll see all types of emotional experiences that have been shared by people who should be, by all means, some types of sociopath. And there are going to be serial killers out there that will go to death row and just not feel a thing, not have an ounce of fear. And then there are going to be people like Ted Bundy who are more or less terrified of being executed. And there's a very big dramatization of this in the movie Ted Bundy, just that one that has his name in the title, and he is just absolutely afraid of death, and he's experiencing all types of emotions. Interestingly, the Zodiac killer disputed this and said that he would not be afraid. He wrote very clearly in the 340 cipher by saying that, I am not afraid of the gas chamber. I think it's more like, I hope you're having lots of fun trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show, which brings up an interesting point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber. Now, was the Zodiac telling the truth? Who really knows? He's just some guy who's hiding in his basement, more or less, more likely than not, writing these letters, talking about how superior and tough he is. Again, this goes back to weakness. He's just a weak individual who doesn't know what to do with his life and is probably very frustrated about some things. That ties into emotion all the same. But it's absolutely not uncommon for serial killers to be extremely afraid or extremely sad or extremely angry prior to their executions. Another example of a serial killer that experienced this was Gordon Northcott, who was the Wineville chicken coop killer. He is, again, dramatized in the movie Changeling with Angelina Jolie, but he was someone who just absolutely wanted to repent and be forgiven via Christianity because he was so scared of the afterlife. And even Frederick Baker, the man who murdered Sweet Fanny Adams in 1867, he also was, very big on repenting before the crime, before his execution at the gallows, and he was reported to experience a lot of fear. And you might be thinking, Ned, are you conflating horror and fear? And I really don't think I am. Just saying that sociopaths, like a sociopathic serial killer, does not experience horror, or they're not going to be horrified by certain things. I don't think they would care about the victims. I don't think that they would care about the families of the victims. And if they were to make some type of public demonstration of care, I don't think that it would be very well regarded. Instead, I think that it would be more about how they just want to put on a show so they can move the situation to a desired outcome. If they're not afraid of death, then they don't care if they're executed. If they are afraid of death, like some of the murderers that I've just mentioned, Ted Bundy, Gordon Northcott, and Frederick Baker, then yeah, they probably would try to do something to be very manipulative. And I mean, that word horror bothered me for some reason. But I said that I had a final challenge question from you that came from the Max Headroom documentary on the Bizarre channel. And that is that, do you believe that the killer is trapped in this mystery? Do you believe that the killer is confined to the mystery and that he is also someone who is lost in it? I was like, wow, no one's ever really asked me that in this direct way. When you look at the Zodiac killer's crimes, you can see very clearly that the Zodiac is somebody who wanted attention, right? I've been talking about that for the entirety of this Zodiac Killer News Report. But the fact that he never gets to publicly state that he was the killer, that he gets to know this information, but does he get to share it with anyone? Or does he get to share it with the public? And the answer to that is no. It's just something that I had never thought about before. Do you think the killer is confined to this mystery? Do you think he's trapped in his own mystery? And I think yes. Again, I do give a shout out to the Bizarre channel. I think that the person who committed the Lake Berryessa stabbing, the person who put on that costume and stabbed Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, I think that he would have wanted to share that with somebody. He would want people to know about what he was wearing, how tough he looked, how cool he looked in his own mind. In reality, it's just some type of makeshift executioner's hood with something, a couple things sewn onto it, but he probably thought that he looked really cool. I mean, he would want people to know that that was him. Now, the other crimes, like the Lake Herman Road murders, Blue Rock Springs, and the Stein murder, maybe not. What do you think? Do you believe the Zodiac killer was trapped in his own mystery or confined to his own mystery? And the final thing that I'll leave you guys with here is that there was a request made by an individual named Adam Ivester, who runs the YouTube channel Real Zodiac Killer Revealed, to have his interviews taken down from BBOR, and Adam has been a guest on this show at least 3 times, talking about his Zodiac killer suspect, John Parr Cox, and Adam had made that request, and I deleted the episodes, and then the next day he told me I could put them back up, and I simply said, well, you can't restore permanently deleted files, and I don't have them just sitting around anymore. And ultimately, Adam has chosen to disassociate himself from BlackBoxOnlineRadio, and a lot of this stems from a dispute that took place in one of the Zodiac Killer Facebook groups, and it was the Zodiac Killer Library, where I'm one of the admins, and it was because somebody proposed a solution to the Zodiac Killer's Z13 cipher, and Adam responded by saying that it was a schizophrenic solution and went on an insult-laced rant more or less in the comments section. And ultimately, that type of language and behavior is not welcome in a lot of the Facebook groups out there, simply for the fact that it can quickly turn into, well, just trolling and unwanted behavior for that particular group. And he was trying to plead his case to me by saying that he's like, I wasn't calling any person schizophrenic. I said the solution is that way. And my simple response is, how does that make anything better? How does making an insult-laced rant about someone's solution versus their personality any better? And this is the stuff that I just don't understand. If you don't agree with somebody's proposed solution to one of the Zodiac Killer ciphers, why don't you just say, I disagree, and provide a reason? Why don't you just say, I don't think that's the right answer, and provide a reason? Why would you ever want to insult somebody for that? And the only reason how I could think that anyone would actually get to that level of anger would be if somebody is trolling or they're proposing a solution that is made up, or they don't genuinely believe what they're saying. They're just trying to harass people. I could understand how people would be upset by that. But if someone has proposed a solution to the Z13 and they're honestly trying to solve a cipher, why on earth would you get mad at them? I mean, just say, no, I don't think so. And even tell them a reason why you don't think so. You can even dispute the facts with people. You can even dispute theories with people. But once it gets to this level of nastiness, name-calling, insults, it's just really far out and out of line. But the reason I'm sharing this with you guys is just to let you know that the episodes with John Parr Cox are no longer available here on Black Box Online Radio. And as far as anything about John Parr Cox as a Zodiac suspect, I rarely have the experience where I'm talking about a Zodiac killer suspect and I'm thinking, should I really be doing this? I mean, this guy seems like a mostly good person, and it's what Mark Hewitt once said when I interviewed him in 2020, when he said that some people get their names dragged through the mud, accused of being a serial killer when they were absolutely nothing of the sort. And Mark Hewitt's suspect was Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and that's why he was talking about him. He was saying that he was talking about his suspect, Ted Kaczynski, who's a convicted murderer. So no matter what you say about Ted Kaczynski, he was already, serving 8 life sentences in prison. He has recently passed away. But with somebody like John Parr Cox, I was once reading his obituary, and it stated just all of these things about how he was helping the Japanese in World War II, and he not only received the highest civilian honor that a foreigner could receive from the Emperor of Japan, but he was also knighted by the Pope, again, for helping the Japanese during World War II, and just there were all of these, heartfelt things from his family in his obituary, and just, I mean, maybe he wasn't a perfect person, because some of Adams' research did show that maybe he was contaminating the San Francisco Bay. I don't know if it was toxic waste or some other type of pollutant, but as another accusation against him. Maybe he wasn't perfect, but just all of this stuff about how, he's just some old guy who was the member of a yacht club, and I don't know, I did have that moment when I'm thinking, should we even be talking about this guy? I mean, but at the same time, I do have to defend Adam. I do have to defend Adam with his accusations for the same reason that I defended Mike Morford when he brought his Zodiac suspect forward, William McDuff Andrew, because it's the concept of, what if this person actually was the killer? What if John Parr Cox or McDuff were the Zodiac, and we're just going to play the game of, well, we don't want to explore this theory because we don't want to hurt his family's feelings, or he seemed like a nice guy, so we don't want to explore this possibility. I can't accept that, and I do encourage Adam to keep looking at his Zodiac theory, but one thing that I also don't understand about John Parr Cox as a Zodiac suspect is the majority of Adam's evidence shows that John Parr Cox would be a very good suspect for writing the letters, but not committing the murders. He was 6 feet 4 inches tall, he was 245 pounds, he was 50 years old. All of this stuff is contrary to the witness descriptions. I mean, when you got a witness description at like Blue Rock Springs being 5 feet 8, 200 pounds, and maybe, like mid-20s to early 30s, and then also the voice that Brian Hartnell heard at Lakebury is estimated to have been between 20 and 30 years old. And all of this evidence is showing that there was a Zodiac who looked completely different than John Parr Cox. But Adam's strongest pieces of evidence are only relevant to the letters, the similar handwriting. John Parr Cox had mild dyslexia, so he would misspell words, and the Zodiac killer misspelled words. Even on a form that John Parr Cox was writing once, he misspelled the word Japanese. As I said, he was very passionate about helping the Japanese people, very passionate about Japanese history and theater, but he misspelled the word Japanese, and he left the E off at the end, Japanes. And it's because he had mild dyslexia, and he talked about this in his interview with Judith K. Dunning. So all of these points that Adam has found are relevant to the letters, and that almost sounds like the only way that his theory could reasonably work is if there was a different killer and a letter writer. And as I said previously, John Parr Cox had a friend who had the nickname Zodiac, and the Zodiac even spelled his own name with the misspelling that was used by John Parr Cox and his friend. As I said, the guy's last name was Dudziak, but his nickname was Zodiac, Zodiak, and you can just explore that for what you will. But that's my take on the subject. That's my honest evaluation of Adam's work. I think that John Parr Cox could work as a suspect for the letters, or he's somewhat of a reasonable suspect for the letters, but if he were to be the suspect for everything, highly unlikely for all of the reasons that I stated, and everybody brings this to our attention. But what do you think about any of the suspects mentioned in this episode? Arthur Lee Allen, John Parr Cox, William McDuff Andrew, Ted Kaczynski, as well as all of those observations about sociopaths and all of the challenge questions. Please put your ideas in the comments section down below. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there is always BlackBoxNed88 over on Instagram. And, of course, the store is now up and running at BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNed88. That's all for me. Goodbye.